Next on News for the Soul, learn intuitive skills with Tina. Tina Zion is a fourth-generation intuitive medium, an internationally known expert in medical intuition and mediumship. As an award-winning author and instructor, she teaches medical intuition and mediumship skills to students around the world. And now she's here to teach you on News for the Soul. Please welcome Tina Zion back to News for the Soul.
Hello there, everybody. And yes, this is Tina. And I have a surprise today, and we're going to do something different. We are going to talk to Maryann Kelley, and she's been a long-time mentoring student, a very, very trusted person that I've worked with for quite a while. And so today, Maryann Kelley and I are going to have a chat, and we hope it will be interesting to everybody. But let me tell you about Maryann first. She is following up with a very, very successful 33-year corporate career working globally. Maryann made a shift to follow her intuition from a corporate career. She went from executive roles to being a medium, a mentor, a speaker, and a holistic energy practitioner, understanding how universal principles and metaphysics and intuition allows communication. And so to combine all of that with business and her medical intuitive skills. So I welcome Maryann Kelley. Maryann, are you there?
I sure am.
Hello there.
Hi, I'm honored to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Bless your heart. Well, one of the first things I was wondering is when you were a child, were you or your family aware of intuition or being intuitive or sensing the deceased?
So I would say that looking back, my grandmother lived with us, and she didn't really call it intuition, but when I look back at the information that she had shared, she certainly was sharing information derived from intuition. And I would say that, regarding myself, I would say that looking back as well, I probably became aware of what I would call more spirituality starting about at age 4. And so that would be, I guess, the best examples to answer that question.
Well, the other thing I was wondering right off the top here, as you and I visit with each other here, I was wondering how, because everybody has their own path, but I was wondering how did you have that journey? How did you achieve your own intuition? How did you end up working with clients in an intuitive way?
Well, that's a little bit of a story with a lot of twists and turns and quite a detour, as you briefly mentioned in my introduction. So, yeah, I had spent 8 years in clinical positions on frontline roles, putting myself through school, and then I did spend 33 years in the corporate world. And as I was ending my last corporate assignment or role, I thought I would open up my own private practice, if you will, just being a solopreneur, using my business skills. And as I did that at the same time, I thought, you know what, I'm going to start to look at this bucket list that actually I had never looked at. And one of the things on it was to try a ballroom dance lesson. And you're probably all wondering, well, what does this have to do with anything else? But in that moment when I was opening up my own private practice and just thought I would try this ballroom dance lesson, I was actually standing still waiting for the lead from my ballroom dance teacher. And it was probably really the first time I would say still, probably since I was 4 years old, because we were always so used to multitasking. And I'm standing there waiting for the lead, and all of these pops of information are coming in. I really wasn't sure exactly what was happening at that time. So in parallel, as I thought, well, I'm going to take ballroom dance lessons because I'm having a good time doing that, but also I was just absolutely so mesmerized by what was unfolding. So I started to investigate more about what this all meant by seeking out, proven mentors. And then at the same time, as I was opening up what I thought was going to be my solo practice in the business world, I got a job offer for a very coveted role for a C-level executive position in the six figures. But I was absolutely so intrigued and so drawn by all these messages that were coming in, I actually turned down that position, and I continued to explore this other avenue because I just, again, was so absolutely drawn to it. And in my very initial days when I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I shared some of my experiences with some people close to me, and I found that the information that I was getting was actually true. So I really had to pursue that path.
Mm-hmm. Well, are you saying that you were literally, I think this is what you were saying, that you were literally standing on the edge of a ballroom floor, dance floor situation?
Yes.
And started to notice intuitive pops? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, so, who would have thought that a, bucket list try a ballroom dance lesson would turn into being a catalyst for, all of this opening up and unfolding. Now, when I looked back, later in retrospect, I realized that I had used intuition quite a bit throughout my business career, but I didn't recognize it as intuition. But then I started to put the pieces together when the flood, I would say more of the flood of information came in. And I really attribute the flood of information coming through because I was still. And I was, not multitasking, and I was standing there waiting for the lead. And then I'm realizing all this other information that's coming in, as where before, while in retrospect, I was using my intuition in the business world. It was it was intermixed with all the other, decision-making that we're doing using more brain-centered function.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to interview you and you and I have this discussion together is for the listeners to really hear that you came from a 33-year at corporate level and working globally to doing this really, I think, full time. And
right.
one of the main reasons I wanted for you and I to have this talk is to help people to really see that doesn't matter what your background is, that you can actually go down this other path. And so I find this fascinating because I've never heard you say either that you were literally standing at the edge of a ballroom dance floor. I love that.
Yes. So I really do want to use this opportunity to encourage all the listeners that our intuition is accessible and available to all of us. And in addition to that, with some practice and training, you can then harness it, for your own application, either for yourself or if you choose to, apply it to, clients, if you open up a practice, etc. So I really do want to encourage people to further investigate this. And I'm not saying that you have to take as big a leap as I did, but I just felt that the pull was just so great that I had to go this direction. And I have absolutely no regrets. I absolutely love this work. It's the most fascinating and fulfilling. I have no complaints about my previous career. That certainly served a really great purpose. And, when I look at how things overall evolved, I'm actually still using many of my skills that I did use in the business world. Say, for example, when I mentor business people in terms of, how they can apply their intuition, in their everyday work or in their everyday lives.
Yes. Yes, I love that. Well, would you say that did you realize that you were following your intuition throughout these twists and turns, as you call it? Did you realize it when it was happening?
No, I can't say I realized it completely when it was happening, especially because one of the ironies of all this is that if you had asked me, many years ago what I thought about this type of concept, I would have said that I'm a complete skeptic. So I'm the skeptic turned champion of this, which is why I can relate to skeptics and I welcome their conversations because I was a skeptic. But I absolutely followed my intuition in terms of making the leap, because if I looked at things as I traditionally would have looked at it, the career path was very much aligned with either the C-level coveted position I was offered or with continuing with opening up my own individual practice and business consulting. Work in the intuitive line, didn't necessarily check that box in a clear way from a mind-centered position. The other thing was, from a traditional perspective, is certainly that, I was turning down a six-figure compensation to start basically, at zero. And so, those types of pro and con decisions are pretty clear cut as far as, what the mind would say to continue with versus what my intuition said.
Ooh, that's beautifully put. Well, how do you think you actually became so comfortable? Because I think what you're describing to our audience here is you developed a comfortableness with doing intuitive work. How do you think that happened?
Well, before actually you and I had the opportunity to meet in the very earliest days, I met with a medium, an established reputable medium, and when I sat down with him, he said, you can do this work, right? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, he put down 3 pictures in front of me of people that I had never seen before. There's nothing special about these pictures. They were just snapshots. And all of a sudden, all this information starts flooding in about these individuals. And I find myself relaying out loud this information to that particular medium. And as I'm relaying the information, my brain is also saying, where is this information coming from? Because it's almost like as I was talking, I'm also asking myself, who's talking? But it was me. But that information wasn't coming from my brain. My brain did not generate that information. That was my intuition, my raw intuition coming through that I was verbalizing. And when I stopped, he said, everything that you said was absolutely correct. And I was dumbfounded because of that experience. So that was one thing. And then, I continued with him for a while as well. And then after we met, I took your courses, which of course are wonderful, and I took all of them. And as a result of the courses and our continued mentoring along the way, I kept seeking validation from those that I was working with to validate what my intuitive reading, was. Was it correct? Did it resonate with the clients? And that's what enabled me to get comfortable. And that's a really key question that you asked there, because ethically, like many of us that are starting out in this type of work, we don't want to make a mistake. We take it very, very seriously as far as what we're saying and, how true it is and how it can help a client. We certainly don't want to. So I was very careful in the beginning to make sure that I was educating myself, working with, proven, trustworthy mentors such as yourself, and also getting validation.
Think more, because I'm always running around all over the place in my courses that I teach, talking about validation, because a lot of students will say, well, how am I going to know I'm right? Well, how do I know this? And I keep saying, as we do this level of work, that you will receive validation in the most surprising ways, actually. So would you say more about what you've experienced that was very validating to you?
Sure. So I had one particular client, and when she approached me saying that she was certain that she had a superficial rash, say. But the intuitive information that I was getting was that while there was seemingly a discoloration on the surface of her skin, it was actually much deeper than that. And as it turned out, the information that I was getting was to indicate that there was a greater sense of urgency associated with this than, say, just a typical rash. And so, I very, calmly relayed to her that I really needed to encourage her to seek further medical attention, because that I didn't really perceive that it was as like a superficial rash, that it was more generated from internally. Basically, the little blood vessels underneath the skin appeared to me as though that they were leaking. And when she did go to follow up, she was kind enough to get back to me and said that she had quite a severe case of what they had diagnosed as purpura, where she really was bleeding internally, in terms of all the capillaries that were kind of breaking for other reasons below the surface of the skin, and to the point where she thought it was more related to her extremities, but also her entire back was seemingly black and blue, because just her body weight of sleeping that evening, caused this to surface. So when I was reading her and I was picking up on, there's whatever is going on in terms of the seemingly superficiality of these manifestations on her limbs, it's actually all along her back as well. So that's an example right there, to address that.
Yes, that's a stunning example, actually. And it sounds like, now, in this situation, it sounds like your client really listened to you and followed through. Was that your experience?
Yes, she did. And I think that it's, I would say that certainly that's a more extreme example, but it certainly illustrates the point. Some other examples that I've had where I picked up on, say, an unusual accumulation of cells. Say in this particular case, it was in a young woman's cervix. And I asked her when the last time she had an opportunity for a typical exam. And she said, well, I've really let it go. It's been over 5 years because she had 2 young children. And so I asked her, to make an appointment and to follow up and to get that scheduled. And again, you never really want to be alarming, but you want to also be providing value. So I asked her if she could let me know within 2 days when she had made that appointment, just as to provide a little bit of additional motivation to make sure that she had done that. And she was kind enough to let me know she made that appointment. Then later she got back to me and she said that she was glad that she had, because they had found an early stage of metastasis that had happened in her cervix. And because it was early, they were able to address it, and she's doing well.
Oh, Maryann, that's a beautiful story. And, for the listeners, that's one of the things that I hear a lot from my courses is, how will I know that I was accurate? How will you ever figure this out? And what I say is, people will just come back and will share with you, just like you're saying, will share with you how correct you are. Or I will, when I was doing readings and healings, because I only teach now, but when I was doing readings and the healings, that I would say some of the wildest things to people that I was picking up, and you know what they would say every time? They would say, oh, I thought so. Or another thing they would say is, Tina, I just had a lab test, or I just had a CT scan, or I just had, one of the medical situations, and it showed exactly what you're saying. So the validation just will come naturally, don't you think? It just comes.
Yeah, I do, because, our clients are, coming to us because they're seeking an additional source of information. And, there's other instances where I said, I'm picking up, say, for example, on some digestive issues. And what I'm also picking up on is, if I look at the point of origin associated with those digestive issues, they go back to actually, several past lives that have carried forward. And, what's a beautiful thing about this work is that when you ask the divine source, the universe, for more information, what I get is almost like a little tiny movie vignette taking me back to that point of origin. And when I describe it to the client about, different instances from the point of origin and some successive past lives that show a pattern that are contributing to what has been carried forward, say that's one of the root causes associated with the digestive issues in the current life, and then they get that aha moment, that makes so much sense now.
Yes. People tell you and me and others that, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. It like brings all the threads together. And, we really have no idea how dramatic this work is sometimes, and dramatic in such a positive way.
Yes, absolutely.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, absolutely. And sometimes we're picking up on things that, as wonderful and sophisticated as some of the medical tests are with CAT scans and CTs, which I certainly appreciate and have had the privilege of taking advantage of when needed, there are other root causes that don't show up on those tests because they have an energetic, point of origin or root cause. So, for example, I had a client and they really couldn't seem to pinpoint, what was going on associated with the seemingly heart-related symptoms at the heart organ level, but yet the client, was still having unexplained manifestations. And when I was looking at him, I saw that there was just such deep, hurt associated with this fear of abandonment that was, triggering this. And so when, I brought that up, and again, you get that almost like a gasp or that, aha moment of, yes, it does surface something that's been buried, down there for a very, very long time because it's painful. But in this work, then we can surface it to evict it and to address it so that we can move forward.
Yes, because we're more than just a physical body. We are actually, I always say, the aliveness in us is actually our spirit. And so we are more than just a physical body. And, while you and I are talking about the medical part of medical intuition, I have a definition, but share with everybody, if you would, what do you think medical intuition entails, or how do you tell people what it is?
So to me, medical intuition is taking the information that is coming in from either whatever term is most resonating for the listener, God, universe, source, and allowing that information to surface. And then what the medical intuitive does is it's very palpable to me. So, for example, I'm getting information and my mind's eye might be seeing a certain manifestation associated with either a blockage or an abnormal amount of cells that seem to be accumulating, or it's very palpable in terms of temperature. It's hot to cold. Is it viscous, like thick, like molasses that I'm getting that sensation, or is it thin, like water, for example? Also, how does it feel? Does it feel rough? Does it feel smooth? Does it feel prickly? And I think it's important to mention it as the medical intuitive to make this information very accessible, as I like to use these analogies, to how we can use the information and relate it to our everyday senses so that we can convey to the client, this is what I'm picking up on. And when we can describe it in a palpable way that makes it almost visceral, then the client is really more engaged in what we're saying. We're in their field, we're working with them, and then it's also empowering for them. So we can use this information to help the client get further into root cause, which can be this life or past lives, and it also can be used to address some emotional issues in collaboration with other credentialed professionals that the client might be working with, a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or other medical professionals, at the physical plane level as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the things that I want to point out to the listeners is that in medical intuition, we are not saying, and I know, Maryann, you don't say this either, we're not saying to drop the Western medical world out of your life. And I know that some practitioners take it to that degree, but what I think you and I are talking about is incorporating medical intuition with Western medicine. And I never, I never say, oh, do this and do that, but don't go to a doctor, don't get this surgery, I never say that, because my hope, and I see this happening all the time, my hope is that our intuitive skills, focusing on their body, their emotions, their life patterns, that actually it assists the medical world. And, so many times, gosh, I have asked the client to call their doctor while they're sitting in my office. I have asked them to please get this checked out and follow through with what your doctor says. And I think that's what you're saying as well.
Absolutely, because, I don't have the experience or the credentials to diagnose. It would be unethical to do so. And so my whole approach is collaborative. And that's why in the examples that I mentioned, I encourage the one, young lady to follow up with her physician to, have her regular, exam to see what was occurring, say, in her cervix. And, and the other one with the woman that seemingly had what she thought was the rash, and it ended up being more broken blood vessels beneath the surface. Again, that's not something that I diagnosed with a diagnosis name. I encouraged her to, seek, credentialed care with her physician. So it's absolutely a collaborative and complementary modality.
Yes. Oh, that's a beautiful way to put it even. That's very wonderful. Well, one of the things I'd like to share with our listeners, too, is that more and more and more, in fact, it's kind of getting surprising to me, more physicians, more nurses, physical therapists, nurse practitioners are coming to my courses, are doing mentoring sessions with me. And here's what the medical people, for those of you who are listening who have a medical background, the medical people are telling me, I know things about the client before I walk into the exam room. And I haven't even looked at their chart. And somehow I just know things. And they say, Tina, how am I doing this? And they want to do it more. And I think that's what you're saying, too. Are you seeing more, people are more open to this, even in the medical world? Have you noticed that, too?
Yes, I am actually getting more nurses and physicians as well as clients in the avenue that you've just described about them getting information and not quite sure how it's happening, and then what do they do with it, and how do they make it repeatable. And as well as I have some physician and nurses clients that contacted me because they, while they had an immense understanding of what was happening to them or associated at the physical plane, they felt for sure that there was another deeper reason for what was happening, and that's why they were seeking a session with me. So there definitely is more openness that I'm seeing from both of those perspectives, either how to capitalize on the information they're getting without even seeing their patients, or perhaps for themselves.
Yes, for themselves as well. So I love that. But, I think what you and I are seeing and sensing is the medical world is really beginning, and even more so than I ever thought it would, beginning to open up to the non-physical realms, because I tell people, in intuitives, we are tapping into the non-physical realms, and we are paying attention to all of that at the same time, and so are these physicians and nurses and other medical practitioners. I love this.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that as, the world becomes smaller and smaller with access to technology in terms of, global awareness, some other cultures that geographically seem to be very far away have traditionally been more open to this type of work. And again, I think in the world becoming smaller, there's been, more of an acceptance that there's other ways that can be very complementary and very helpful, to look at really what is the total picture.
Yes, they are seeing more of a total picture, and I'm loving that. And it just seems like it's happening naturally, very, very naturally. Another thing I wanted to bring up is that a lot of people tell me that they are, I've had one woman, she said, there's nobody around me that understands this intuitive stuff. She literally said, I live out in the country. I'm surrounded with cornfields. And she said, I feel so alone. Have you come across that too?
Yes, but I would think it's also improving, because I think that, there's an initial, fear in terms of sharing what you're experiencing, because you feel as though it's, not happening to, others. And there's this fear of, judgment. And I will certainly say openly that when this first started to happen to me, I had an initial fear as well, as far as how would, 33 years worth of corporate colleagues that I had really worked hard to, gain a good reputation with, a very credible reputation. How are, they going to react? How are, friends going to react? And then over time, though, with all the information that just keeps coming in, you really surrender to, to the fact that the information is coming, and it's really a calm just came over me anyway, such that I don't really have those concerns about, sharing it. But initially, I can certainly relate to what that woman is saying. But, I think that the more that people start talking about it, the more people will find out that there'll be less judgment than they might have perceived. One of my favorite examples when I first started to actually relay what was happening, and I was basically changing careers, is I have a friend that is a career-long chief information officer, and as I was relaying what was happening, and I was preparing myself initially for some judgment or some rejection or just being baffled, and to my delight, the response was, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait to do a reading with you."
Exactly. People are fascinated, just fascinated with it. I think that's my experience too.
Yeah, and so, the reputation that I had in the corporate world was, one that I was trustworthy. I had all my facts and figures. I was, prepared. And that ethics of that background and that reputation that I had earned in the corporate world, transferred into this work. So people that had trusted me in the business world, they trusted me again.
Oh, that's a good way to put it, especially for our listeners, because I've experienced that so many students are afraid. They're afraid to let people know, and I will share it with them. I said, just share what it is that you are aware of, and they will soon figure out that you are very, very accurate, and we are meant to. One of my hopes is that we take the fear out of this for people, because we're very, very naturally intuitive. So I think that's what you're talking about too, is helping people take the fear out of it.
Yeah, and I think that one of the ways that I found really fun to do that is, I would share what was going on with me, and I would say, you know what, we can try, let's just play with it and try it with you. And I started to just, teach them how to perceive, auras just for fun, and or other things like that. And they started to realize, wow, that there is something to this. And some people might have taken it farther than others, but that was another way, to make it, something that the other person could experience in an easy, simple, fun, really inconsequential way, to make it, less fearful for the person sharing the information, but also to make it also intriguing and interesting to the person receiving that news.
Yes. That's well put. Well, one of the things I want to share with people and that you and I can talk about is that I really run around all over the place telling people that to be an intuitive and a medical intuitive is more than just giving information, and that I want to always take a session into a healing of, so that there's, and how I describe healing, I'd love to hear how you describe it too. I describe healing as helping someone achieve at least a positive change. And many times that's a release of an old burden, even an old emotional burden. But would you talk about taking our readings, because normally a reading is considered, we give information. But the way I teach it is we take this into a healing every time that we have a session with somebody. Could you say more about that and what you've noticed about the healing part of your readings?
Sure. I'd be delighted to do that. So similarly, as you said, when I'm working with a client, I like to also provide value to them after the session. And so that is a great, to me, an entree into the healing conversation. So when we're talking about, say, what was that point of origin or that fear of abandonment or that resentment, and giving them tools to be able to navigate, because all of our lives are going to have, these twists and turns and the detours and things like that. So, when we can help a client surface, a past hurt, be able to address it, and also to give them tools to navigate further, it doesn't mean that there will be never any other disappointment in life. But what it does do is makes the person more resilient and also more self-aware and less afraid of, acknowledging and surfacing some really past hurts, because in doing so, there's this release. It's a sense of freedom.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, I love that. And like I said, I always want to guide the person, and we're really not doing this for people. I think, if anything, Maryann, you and I and other students are really helping people to realize that they hold their own power, that we're not doing something powerful to them or over them or whatever. That, what have you noticed about really teaching people how powerful they are?
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, what I say to my clients is that I'm delighted, absolutely delighted to work with you, and I want to do so to the point where you don't need me anymore. So it's not about making the student dependent upon us. It's about teaching and empowering that student in terms of being able to, access their own intuition, make it applicable, make it something that they can harness going forward. And, we offer them certain tools to be able to do that. So I absolutely agree, when, people might start out looking to me to kind of like make it better. And it's like, I am using intuitive information to bring to the client, but the client has to have the willingness to do the work. And then the beauty of it is that then they can realize how much they can access. And, I consider myself the conduit, but the client has the power to, proceed. And again, they may need some of our help, and I'm more than happy to provide that. But I do think it's ethically also important to make the client aware that it's not about me saying I'm the only one that can do this, because certainly not. But even more so to the other extreme, you all can do this.
Yes, absolutely. Then that's my always my goal is to, we become the teachers. We really do. As medical intuitives, I see us as becoming the teachers to teach other people that they have these abilities, they have these skills. And one of the ways I did it at the end of a session, I would give the client homework. And by that I mean I would give them an assignment. It was up to them whether they did it or not. But I would give them an assignment about how really that applied to whatever it is we did in the session, to give them an assignment to continue on, to actually realize that we do not have all the power and we don't have power over them. So do you give homework, and can you think of some examples of homework that you've given?
Yes. So I share the tools that help clients understand how to, say, protect themselves energetically and do important energetic cleansing, just like at the body level, we brush our teeth and things like that. But in addition to what you're saying more specifically, I will say to the client, when you are having a similar feeling, just like with the abandonment issue, if you experience something else, ask, in your quiet moment, what is the cause of this? So that just the process that we had just guided that client through. So let's say I'm working with a gentleman whose heart manifestations, although seemingly fine at the physical level, he really still was having, quite a bit of distress and discomfort caused by these, intense feelings of abandonment that kept surfacing. And so one of the pieces of homework that I gave him is I said, today we didn't get a chance to discuss, at any length really, because in the interest of time, that there's also, say, a secondary digestive issue that is, that you're aware of. So ask yourself after this session, to you, what is it about life that you're having a harder time digesting? About life, not about a specific food. I mean, a specific food may be part of the equation, but another part of the equation is about what are you having a hard time digesting? And he was nice enough to get back to me and say, I'm having a really hard time digesting the fact that my daughter is getting married.
Yes, that's a good example.
So that's an example of some homework, that, caused him to think, geez, it's not just this typical, heartburn and things like that I'm really having a hard time with the fact that my baby is getting married.
Oh, bless his heart. Yeah, that's how it works. We're more than just a physical body. We are a spirit body. We are emotions. Our emotions create either health in our body or ill health in our body. It has a lot to do. And see, that's a good example of how our emotions and our thoughts make us well or tend to make us ill. That's a great example.
Yeah, so I definitely believe in, in the homework or, how they can do their own, I guess, follow up with themselves. And I think that that's also empowering for that person as well.
Yes, that's my goal every time, is to empower everybody else so that they don't think that I have the power, that I'm the only one that can do this. I want everyone to know that, no, we have this ability. The other thing I'd really like to talk about before we run out of time here is how real intuition is, that it's truly very, very real. And people will ask me, well, how do I tell if it's my thinking mind or intuition? And as you know, Maryann, I'm always talking about you take the pop. You take the pop of information. So could you just talk to people, too, about what you and I mean by you take the pop of information?
Yes. So, one example of that, when you had said earlier in this conversation, Tina, sometimes you find yourself saying the darndest things, right? And so, I was having a session with a certain client, and we were going over a series of points. And then, all of a sudden I said, I was guided to say kitchen sink. And, my logical brain is like, that sounds so bizarre. And it sounds so out of context, but you do learn to trust the process. And so I said, I don't really understand why I'm getting kitchen sink. And the person was like, oh my gosh, now I get it. And I'm like, okay, good. And, when you are having these types of conversations with the client and something resonates so much, you as the medical intuitive may not necessarily understand all of the whole backstory, but the client does.
Yes.
And they will actually then relay, the rest of the story, which is great because then you get more of the backstory. But more importantly, they understand, what was actually a trigger for them that was causing a level of discomfort. And, now this trigger, which can be something, physical, just sitting around the house, and now they can address it.
Well, see, and you took the pop what did you say? A kitchen sink, I think is what you said.
Kitchen sink.
But see, it just pops in out of nowhere. And
right, out of nowhere.
I tell people, we say the craziest things to people, and kitchen sink being a really good example. And people will say, "Oh, I thought so," or "Oh, that makes total sense to me." And sometimes I'll go, "What? It does?" And that's a good example, the kitchen sink. That's a great example. But then I think that
as the intuitive in the early days of doing this type of work, our brain wants to talk us out of saying it because our brain can't rationalize how this makes sense, and it's initially something that can be challenging to do to surrender to the fact that I'm getting this information for a reason and I'm going to have the courage to say it. So it sounds like an oxymoron, but actually there's a lot of strength required in surrender. You have to have the courage to surrender. But in doing so, a lot of valuable information comes out. And it's also then an opportunity not only to provide value to the client, but it's also an opportunity then for the client to see, like, how would Maryann Kelley ever know it's a kitchen sink? I, Maryann Kelley, would not. Okay, that's why the information is coming in, through divine sources. But it's an example that I could give to the client and say, see how that came in as a pop to me out of nowhere? And then I can encourage the client, take your pops of information.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Well, could you tell everybody too, because we'll start to bring this to a close a little bit here, but how would you describe the mission that you have for your practice, for your profession as a practitioner of medical intuition? How would you describe your mission?
Well, this is a mission that is also just available for reading on my website as well. But what I have as my mission is that only positive energies for the greatest good, highest purpose, optimal health and well-being, comfort and respect are to ever be in these sessions as associated with divine wisdom. There is respect, not judgment, so all have a voice to be heard and honored. All are accepted to find, live, and stand strong in their truth. Surrender is the strength to seek your greatest potential. Waiting is cherished patience when the gifts of gratitude and fulfillment await us. We are forever grounded in the trust and knowing that love prevails. So that's my mission.
Oh, I don't think I've ever heard that and never heard it from you. And I'm sitting here smiling at you, even though we're on radio, but I'm sitting here smiling with you, and I'm covered with goosebumps. So if you would, tell people how to get a hold of you, if you would.
Sure. The best way to reach me is my website, and that's Intuitive Services Insight, all one word, .com. That is the best way to reach me.
Okay. And your website, did you mention that?
That is my website, and then the email that's associated with the website would be info@intuitiveservicesinsight.com.
Okay, great. All right, great. Well, what other wisdom or what other comment do you have here as we close?
Well, I would just encourage people at a minimum to explore their own intuition, because it really is quite enlightening and empowering for themselves, and it's available to everybody. It's the best data plan available. So when we look at our phones and look at a data plan, I mean, your intuition is available 7 by 24 by 365. So it's the best data plan ever.
Thank you so much, Maryann Kelley. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you for the opportunity and for being a treasured mentor to me all these years.
Oh, bless your heart. Well, as we bring our time is coming to a close here, the News for the Soul and the founder, Nicole Marie Whitney, she always calls this last little bit the shameless self-promotion. And so my shameless self, it makes me giggle saying it, my shameless self-promotion would be that I have 4 courses coming up, well, actually 3 courses and a conference. And so just to share with you, June 3rd to the 7th, I will be at the Omega Institute, And this particular course will be Become a Medium and a Healer for the Troubled Deceased. So Maryann and I didn't get time to go into this, but many times if you choose, mediumship comes into medical intuition. So that course will be strictly about mediumship and working with the deceased. Then June 21st to the 23rd, I go to Fellowships of the Spirit, and that is also in New York State, along with Omega Institute. And there I offer at Fellowships, June 21 to 23, it's a 3-day, to become a medical intuitive practitioner. And so this is really my base course of where to start and then go on after that. Then let's see what I do. Then August 12th to the 16th, I'm back at Omega Institute in New York State. Now, these are in New York State, not the city. And I'm also going to become a medical intuitive practitioner in that course, so there's a couple of opportunities there. And then August 16th to the 18th, Omega Institute is also offering a conference, and I'm only one of, I think 6, 7, or 8 speakers. But that conference, and I think this is a very, very interesting topic. The conference that they're doing there is called Trauma and the Soul. So it's Trauma and the Soul Conference. And so I'm developing my little part of that course, that conference also, to help people out, because we are a soul and we are eternal. And I love to talk about that, and I love the healing part of what Maryann and I have been talking about with medical intuition, is to take these things to a healing of some kind. And so bless your hearts for being with us, and I thank you very much, and I thank Maryann Kelley very, very much. And I'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Hear all of our previously aired broadcasts of News for the Soul online at newsforthesoul.com. Now let's get back to the show.